Hi, I'm Jeff Tamburello. I am one of the directors of the Southwest Florida RIA. I'm joined by the other director of the Southwest Florida RIA, Mike Lyons. We had Dylan Shea with Guardian Legal. He's one of our corporate sponsors. He was a speaker at last month's luncheon. He talked about the condo laws that came about in relation to the Parkside or the Surfside condo collapse. And we really thought it was great information. It was an awesome presentation, Dylan. And we thought this would be something to put on the internet that kind of everybody that wasn't at the luncheon should see this information, particularly if you're investing in the condo space.
Thanks, Jeff. So welcome to the Southwest Florida RIA. My name's, as Jeff said, Dylan Shea, and I run a law firm in Guardian Legal, and we focus on real estate, business law, estate planning, and asset protection for investors, small business owners, and individuals just like you. We really enjoy representing them, helping them guard the assets that they've worked so hard to protect. So as Jeff said, today I'll be presenting on the Surfside condo collapse and the resulting legislation. But before we begin, quick disclaimer that this is not legal advice. Please rely on this to your own detriment. It's just for informational purposes. Does not form attorney-client relationship. So to start off, it's helpful to kind of understand the state of affairs of the condo market and condo law before the Surfside collapse. Prior to 2021, as many of you know, condos associations are required to set a budget for the condos and to collect and make assessments for monies that are necessary for the maintenance of the condo common elements. So this includes everything from the landscaping, the parking, to the roof and the exterior windows most of the time. Now, before 2021, there wasn't any requirement for condo associations to have a structural reserve study. And a structural reserve study is basically where they look at the budget and they say, are we collecting enough money in assessments to pay out for what's required for these upcoming capital improvements? Some of them are quite large. A roof might cost $100,000. If there's cracking foundation work, that could cost tens of thousands of dollars. So structural reserve study is something that needs to look at the budget and see if there's enough money coming in, and there was no requirement for that prior to 2021. There was also the ability for condo associations, even though they were required to pull in money and make assessments for structural reserves, they could actually waive those structural reserves. And lo and behold, they did that a lot. So it's pretty common that condo associations would waive the requirement to have any structural reserve assessments. And then finally, they were also able to pool the monies. So money that was used for landscaping or just minor cleanup and fix up of the condo was oftentimes kept in the same account as what would be required for the reserve money for a roof or a parking deck or resurfacing a parking deck or something like that. So what ended up resulting is a lot of people kind of played this condo roulette. People would buy condos and say, well, I know there's an assessment coming down the line, but the value of my condo is going to go up so much by the time that hits that I'm just going to refinance and take out money for that $50,000 assessment that's coming up. Or possibly they would say, I'm going to buy in and I'm just going to hold it for a couple of years and then I'm going to sell and I'm going to get out before that assessment hits. Or, in the most morbid of circumstances, I'm going to pass away and my kids are going to have to handle that. So it's not something that I'm going to have to deal with. So you kind of had this condo roulette scenario where people were just taking the chance of whether or not that assessment was going to hit during their period of ownership. And really,
if I can chime in there on the investment side, when purchasing one, Jeff and I've talked about this a lot in meetings. Just on a side note, whenever you buy a condo, those documents that show what they have in reserves, what they have coming up, you need to look at all that. I think a lot of times you can just you can buy into a bad situation where what you're just talking about, that condo roulette. I mean, you're buying into something where they have no reserves. If something goes wrong, they're in big trouble. Just on the investment side, you gotta be real careful.
And to be fair, not to disparage any individual investors, but a lot of them just don't have the sophistication to look at it and say, okay, the roof's going to cost $100,000. There's 10 years left. That means that $10,000 a year has to be collected to be able to fully fund that reserve for the roof. So you're right. This is an important thing to look at. And this is not just a Florida problem. I mean, the building boom over the last 50 years has really created a situation where we have a lot of condominiums and residential multifamily units that have been put up with individual ownership through the condominium statutes, and these buildings are aging. You know, they're 30, 40, 50 years old, and there needs to be a certain amount of concern for the upkeep of the structural members of the building. So that's kind of the backdrop of where the law was and kind of the process of what was happening with condo reserves and assessments prior to Surfside.
Sure.
But then moving to Surfside, the specific storyline, tragic story in the news in 2021. So the Champlain Towers, there were 3 of them. There was a Champlain North, Champlain South, which is the one that collapsed, and then one in the middle that was not on the beach. But the Champlain South Tower, at the time of its collapse, it was built in 1981, so it was already 39 years old, and it had 12 stories tall, and it had 136 total units. So the interesting thing is, if you look on the handout, owners had previously noted and taken pictures of the severe structural deterioration that was occurring at the condo. Separating concrete, rebar showing, so much that you can actually stick your hand in a hole. So obviously this was an issue before the condo collapsed and led to the condo's collapse. So on June 24th of 2021, the condo, about 1 a.m., the pool deck and the parking structure collapsed, and then the damage from that, sliding sideways and going underneath the condo, the parking deck, and hitting the other structural members of the condo, caused about 10 minutes later, another third of the residential units to collapse. Wow. And so it's just a horrific scene. There's about 100 casualties. And at the time it's said and done, there's about $1 billion of settlement paid out to those that lost their lives. And then another 96 million in personal property and personal injury damages paid to the others. So the interesting thing about the postmortem that was done by architects, engineers, and the attorneys was that at the time that it collapsed, just based on the analysis of the pictures and what other people had seen, the Surfside condo needed $15 million of repairs to get it structurally sound again. And yet they only had $1 million in the coffers, the association coffers. So they were severely underfunded. And the people that had designed the condo, Friedman Associate Architects, and then Breiteman and Girardeau Associate Engineers, they had a little bit of a reputation for cutting corners, for not doing everything as sturdy as it could be. And they actually found that the supporting columns of the condominium were only rated for like half the load. Like they should have been double the size to carry this 12 stories, this 136 units. And they completely failed at that. So, as of the day that it was built, the day it got a CO, it was already structurally unsound. And, but then of course, 39 years later, catastrophe happened. So why is this important? I mean, obviously, anytime you're talking about life and death, it's a big issue, but the scale on which the number of condos that are affected by this aging is also a big point. So in Florida, we have about 1.5 million condos, and 61% of those, or 900,000 condos, are already in that 30+ year range. So you've got condos that are already getting to that age where they need structural improvements, probably, and structural upkeep. 10% of all Florida residents, so we've got about 22 million people in the state, and so you got 2 million plus people that live in these condos, and the majority of those are over 30 years old. 40% of the total condos that were built that are these 30-year-old condos are in Broward and Miami-Dade, and again, that's it's up against the ocean. It's getting higher winds. It's getting the salt water for the freeze-thaw cycle. So those particular condos are in a certain circumstance, they're more susceptible to these structural integrity issues than say maybe one in Orlando.
Well, anything exposed to the elements, saltwater just eats away at everything. I mean, don't get me wrong, love the water on it constantly, but from a ownership standpoint, a lot of people love to be on water for obvious reasons, but there's a lot more wear and tear and a lot more you need to do to preserve, whether it be a single family home or a condo if it's on the water. There's just a lot more to it. Salt water eats away at everything. So.
Right, and you can usually see that. Like anytime you go to a concrete pier, you go out fishing, you walk out on it, you can see the leaching of the chemicals coming out of the concrete from where that salt water has hit it and pulling out the calcium and just and then it also gets in there and it rusts the rebar. So it has multiple effects on the deterioration of the structural integrity. But the most mind-blowing stat of all this is that of all the condo associations that we have, half of them don't have adequate reserves, and most of that half don't have any reserves. So zero money in the coffers that could repair a roof or repair a foundation or something like that. So yeah, so after the condo collapsed, DeSantis and the legislature jumped into action, and in 2024 they passed Senate Bill 4D, and many people immediately after that came out and said there's going to have to be revisions because it didn't cover everything. It wasn't very complete. And so the very next year in 2023, they passed Senate Bill 154, kind of the Band-Aid bill to cover all the items that were missing in the first bill. And so while the bill has many parts, we're just going to kind of focus on the two big points of the bill. The first one being the need for a structural reserve study to look at the condo board's budget and see if enough money is being assessed and taken in to actually repair and make structural repairs to the buildings. And then the second one is a milestone inspection. So the milestone inspection is basically an inspection that has to be done by a licensed architect, a licensed engineer, or even a team of licensed architects and engineers. And it has to be done by the time the building's at least 30 years old. So the local building department is like the enforcement agency for this process. And they have a little bit of flexibility. They can bump it up a little bit and say, this building just hasn't aged well, or it went through a major hurricane. It's 26 years old. We want to go ahead and require that milestone inspection. Now, the milestone inspection is going to look mainly at the structural elements of the building, the common elements. So that includes, your roof, your foundation, your load-bearing walls, your waterproofing and exterior envelope, your building and exterior doors. And the milestone inspection is broken up into two parts. So there's a phase one and a phase two. The phase one is more of a qualitative inspection. So that same team of architects and engineers, they come through and they look, and it's not a code violation inspection. They're not trying to, condemn the building, but they're just looking to see, are there major structural components that look like they need further testing? Interestingly, the statute says not surface imperfections. So, and they name off cracks, distortions, sagging, deflection, signs of leakage. Those all seem like issues that I'd be concerned about, but apparently they're looking for more serious members than that, right?
Yeah, if you're going to buy a condo and you walk around, you start seeing that, I'd be like, something's not right here. Yeah.
If you're walking on the fourth floor and your floor is sagging.
Yeah, I was always taught by an inspector, if it's smaller than the width of a quarter, he doesn't. It's not the end of the world, maybe, but they could have. They should have put cracks larger than or smaller than. They should have defined.
Right, like quarter inch or whatever else the thing is. Yeah, agreed.
You can stick your hand in it. That's probably a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So if this team of engineers finds in that phase one inspection that there are any issues of concern, then they're going to have a phase two inspection. And the phase two inspection is more of a quantitative inspection. So they look at all those same elements and they just say, what are the recommended fixes for this? And how much money is it going to cost? Do you need to shore up this additional column? Does this need to have, additional, waterproofing or other things to keep wind and rain from getting inside the building envelope? So they're going to make specific recommendations and put that together in a report called the phase two report. So that's the one component, the milestone inspection. The second component is the structural reserve integrity study. And same people, the engineers, architects, and they're going to look at many of the same components. They're going to say, the roof, the load-bearing walls, fireproofing, windows and doors, plumbing, electric, or any deferred maintenance item that has a price tag of about $10,000 or more, that if it were to fail, were to have a deleterious effect on these other structural components.
Let me ask you a question on that. Specific to these inspections, Is there again, and I'm not sure if you know the answer to this or not, but is there a specific training that these individuals that are inspecting it need to have outside of what would be normal for an engineer and architect, or do they need anything specific that you do know, or?
No, I'm not aware of any particular training that they need to have, just that they are licensed architects to practice in the state of Florida.
Gotcha.
And, you know, I was going to talk about later on the presentation, but we're actually already seeing, you know, out of state engineers and architects coming in that their main office is in Milwaukee, and they've never had a business here before, but now they're setting up satellite offices here to be able to handle those, and they're marketing directly to condominium associations saying we handle these types of inspections.
Gotcha.
So the structural integrity reserve study, they basically look at the money coming in from the assessments, and for people that don't have a good understanding of how the assessments are usually calculated, it's pretty simple. I mean, there's straight line funding, right? So you take a look at a roof. If a roof is, I already said, you know, if a roof is 30 years old and it's going to cost $30,000 to replace it, then you've got to collect $1,000 a year to make that so that by the time you get to 30 years, you have enough money to pay for that roof. Right. The big things that the law said this time, as that changed what was happening before, was now you can no longer waive it. So they can't get together at the annual board meeting with just a quorum and a majority of the quorum say, you know what, we're actually not going to collect for the roof this year. You can't do that. The second thing they can't do is they can't pool. So before you could put money in for the roof right next to in the same account with money for the landscaping or some other, you know, non-structural improvement item that was just a yearly expense. They can't be in the same account. Now you can pool structural items. So you could have the roof along with, you know, the exterior building envelope or the foundation funds could all be in one account, but they can't be with non-structural items.
So in the future, they corrected the ability to use funds that sound like way more important, and then you have like cosmetic funds, and then you have structural, and structural can't be touched. Yeah. So
yeah, and they're regularly doing that. It's happening all the time. There, people are using money that was coming in for structural funds and you know, robbing Peter to pay Paul, basically. So the other thing is that these condo associations have to have their budgets fixed by 2025. So it's a pretty short period of time here that they have to go in, make the assessments, come up with what's going to be required to keep this structurally sound, and then start putting in assessments that are going to match and fully fund those requirements.
And it would be a good thing to note going in again to purchase. If you're purchasing a condo, you need to see where they're at. If they are aware, they should be by now, I think, where their default or how much they lack to fully fund those reserves and what kind of assessments coming. And again, there's paperwork and contracts for residential property when you purchase it that go over that, but I'd be real thorough with that because that's going to backfire. Both if you're the agent selling the property or the one, you know, buying, the individual. Make sure you got your eyes dotted and your T's crossed.
Well, that's why the replacement reserve's real, because I looked at a condo the other day and they do have replacement reserves for the roof, but it was from an estimate 15 years ago.
Oh yeah.
So I'm like, that's probably not even, it's probably half enough.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, the law is not a fail-safe, right? I mean, the actual collection of the reserves, like, you know, just because you send out an assessment doesn't mean that you get 100% paid in, right? So are they following up on that? Did the wear and tear of the actual element wear and tear like it was estimated to be 20 years later? You know, like just because the roof says 30 years, you know, I bought tires before that say 60,000 miles. I didn't get 60,000 miles out of them, right? So
you either,
huh? Yeah. Yeah, so you have to kind of do that analysis. It still has to be maintained, and you have to go through the analysis each year to check it. So the procedure for this coming up is that the condo associations have to self-report. It's their duty to reach out to the county, actually to the DBPR, the Division of Condominiums. So they're supposed to contact the DBPR and tell them how many units they have and how many buildings they have over 3 stories tall. Because I should have mentioned this earlier, but the law only affects condominiums that are over 3 stories and higher. So if you've got a low rise 2-story, you know, they're not so much concerned about that collapsing. But so after the DBPR collects all this information, the county culls it together, and then they make a list, and they come up with they look at their records and say, okay, when was the condo CO'd? and how old is it now, and which ones need to get notices. So the county actually sends out notices to all the condominiums and tells them, hey, you're coming up on 30 years or 25 years if they choose, and you're going to need a milestone inspection. And by the way, you also need the structural reserve study completed. When the condominium association gets that notice from the county, they have 14 days to send that information out to the owners. So they have to push it, on their website. They have to post it in like a visible place in the, I don't know, say the
Common
hall,
area,
common area. They have to send it by any other notice that's required by the condo docs. So if you're required to send it certified mail, all the owners are going to get one certified mail by email, whatever it might be. So from that date that they get the notice from the county, they've got 180 days to perform that phase 1 inspection. And then from that phase 1 inspection, assuming that there's any kind of structural issues that come of it, there's going to be another 180 days that they have to have the second phase 2 inspection. So that's basically a year, right? You've got 100, 180, 360 there. And then from the time of the phase 2 inspection and the actual recommendations of what needs to be done, there's 365 days that the condo associations have to start and commence construction. So this is a pretty tight time period. You only really have 2 years from the time the county gives you a notice to get to work and start making those repairs. So we actually, Guardian Legal reached out to Lee County Building Department and asked about this, and they said they've already sent out notices. So all the condos that are already 30 years old or even 25 years old in that range that they've identified, they've already sent out notices, and they've already started working with the condominium associations to get the phase 1 inspections started. And we also pulled the data from the surrounding counties, Lee County and the surrounding counties, for how many condominiums they have, which is surprising because I would have thought that Collier had more. But Lee County leads the way with almost 2,600 buildings and 30,000 units. And Collier County follows closely behind with 2,100 buildings and about 34,000 units. Sarasota's at 1,400, 19,000 units, and Charlotte's only 500, although they're having a boom right now. There's tons of condos going up in Charlotte. Yeah. And about 5,000 units there. So, looking at the price per square foot and what condos sell here on the West Coast, down in Naples and Marco Island and Pelican Bay, you might get condos that are selling at $1,000, $2,000 a square foot. Maybe the really high end ones, penthouses at $2,300, $2,400 a square foot, but the numbers just aren't very high compared to where that 40% of the condos are over on the East Coast for Miami and Broward, Fort Lauderdale, those kind of areas. So, how's it going to affect it? Well, I think a great study is just looking at what happened in Surfside. Surfside, after the payouts, so after the billion and after the 96 million, if you lost your condo and you got paid some portion of 96 million, there's a group that came out, DAMAC, I don't know if that's pronounced, DAMAC International, came out and they purchased the dirt and paid the condo owners $120 million. So the quick, simple math is 136 units. They paid almost $1 million a unit for those condos. So the people that lost their condo got paid out a portion of 96 million, and they got 120 million or almost $1 million a unit on the buyout. Whereas, and what they plan on doing that is they plan on developing into 52 unit luxury condos. They're going to be somewhere around 4,000 or 9,000, somewhere between 4,000 and 9,000 square feet. And the price point of this for $25 million condos is somewhere in the $3,800 square foot range. So you can see that's a big difference compared to what we have over here at the very high end, maybe $2,300 square foot. But interestingly, the people that sold right before it collapsed, we looked on Zillow and kind of pulled some of the past sales. There's one that sold 8 days prior to the collapse, and that was June 16th, and it sold for $700,000 at about $406 a square foot. So there's plenty of buffer there, right? $406 a square foot up to $3,500 that they plan on selling them at. In those kind of circumstances, you're going to have developers just coming in and offering to buy the whole condo because the dirt is so much more, is worth so much more. So it really comes down to kind of like real estate basics, location, location, location. If you're in a place that's got, some kind of awesome amenity, you're overlooking the bay, you're on the water, you've got, maybe on a canal. I don't know, but the underlying dirt value can totally overcome the price to fix the condo. No one's going to be putting a couple $1 million in a condo if the highest and best use is a $1.3 billion condo that could be there. They're just going to go to try to make the buyout. On the other hand, in areas that are maybe a little inland or that don't have the same underlying land value, you might actually see some depressed pricing on condominiums, because just imagine the scenario. You've got a condo that's somewhere kind of central, central Fort Myers, and it's mainly a bunch of retired people. They're on fixed income. They don't have a mortgage. All they're paying each month is the utilities. They pay their taxes, and then they pay an assessment every year, but that's been pushed off, right? So they're not paying big assessments. And then all of a sudden this law comes along and they're hit with an $80,000 or $110,000 assessment. A lot of those individuals are not going to want to pay, or maybe don't have the resources to pay. So, in those kind of cases, what's going to happen is the association is going to, request the lien. It's not paid, or excuse me, not request the assessment. It's not paid. They're going to impose a lien on the property. And then if that's not paid, then they're going to foreclose on the property. So you could end up with a situation where you've got a semi-high-rise building that's got, I don't know, 80 units in it, and maybe a big chunk of them all kind of go into foreclosure at the same time, because it's mainly retirees that are on fixed income. They don't have the ability to come up with $110,000. They just don't pay it. They don't act fast enough, and then they get foreclosed on. And then the only way that the condo association is going to actually collect on that assessment is by foreclosing it, and then it's going to go to fire sale, on the county. So we could see, kind of little pockets of opportunity that investors could look at and buy those maybe cheaper than what they're going right now. But big picture, is it going to be doom and gloom? I don't think so. I think the majority of them are going to get either fixed up. We're seeing, or I would talk to a number of attorneys that represent banks that are collateralizing the assessments. So they're lending to the associations based on the future assessments, and they're collateralizing those. So in those cases, you'd have the bank stepping in and foreclosing, as opposed to the condo association if you didn't pay them. But,
bankers, they have such big hearts, that won't happen.
Yeah, they do, right? This probably going to give them a lot more time just because of the bank.
Yeah.
Right? But there's a lot of other factors that, especially here in Southwest Florida, that are really affecting us, like the hurricane effects. There's tons of condos right now that were hit hard by Hurricane Ian. They've already paid out basically all their reserves to try to fix it. They're already at a deficit. They don't have enough money to fund it. And then on top of that, you've got an increase in the taxes, and the insurance. Insurance has gone crazy. We've heard stories of 30% increases all the way up to 10x on the cost of flood insurance and wind insurance. So, your insurance is another huge thing that's factoring into this. So in this area, there may even be a higher percentage of opportunities, just because you're starting at zero with zero reserves from condos that got hit by Hurricane Ian, and now all of a sudden they're having to look at other structural items that weren't considered in Hurricane Ian. So who knows on that? A quick note about condo terminations, just so everybody knows. A condo termination requires an 80% approval vote by the members of the condo association to terminate it. But then once that approval happens, you can have a 5% membership of the condo association that blocks it. And so only 5% is required to block a buyout bid. And then once that 5% has basically stalled and stopped that bid, it's a 2-year. There's like a 2-year moratorium. They can't go back and try to re-offer again. So some of these, if the owners are not savvy enough to look at the assessments, to look at what the budget currently is, to look at what the current structural integrity status of the building is, and they reject such a condominium buyout bid, then they're going to be stuck either paying those assessments or getting foreclosed on. So, in conclusion, kind of like Mike said, you really got to do your due diligence. I mean, at Guardian Legal, we're always happy to help do that and help you walk through the diligence process. Make sure your contracts are written to include enough time and specific requirements for what you need, an estoppel, a full review of the structural reserve integrity study, and they're required to keep that for 15 years. So It's not like they're going to get it done this year and the next year you're not going to be able to find it. But there could be a situation where if you don't do your due diligence, you buy a condo and you step into, an $80,000 assessment a year after you buy the condo, and then that totally blows your numbers for how you're underwriting that deal.
And even if your intention was to rent the property out, as an investment or live in it, either way, that's a bad day. So yeah, no one wants to get hit with that kind of assessment. So no, that's excellent point.
Yeah. So it may still, like I said, because it's a 2-year process, to go from starting that notice from the county all the way through to the end of the phase 2 inspection. It may still take a little bit of time, but after giving it at the RIA, after giving this presentation, I kind of thought through it and I thought, you know what, NPR just had an article, I think maybe February 12th or something, that was talking about, no, it was actually before, so it was in January, but they were talking about the number of condominium offers that are being made. They're talking to different developers, and tons of them are coming down and just licking their chops, looking at especially the high priced, dirt that's right on the ocean, and they're making offers on that. So I think actually if there is buyout activity, it's going to come early, before they get to this point, because they don't want to, every step that the condo association makes down that line of spending money to get the architect and the engineer to come, spending money to get the assessments done, that's just raising the total cost that the developer would have to pay off. So I think if there are opportunities, a lot of those buyout opportunities are probably coming soon, but we'll probably know pretty quickly how it actually is getting rolled out. So how much it's going to affect the market. But overall, I think it's going to make the market go higher. I think those in really good spots are gonna have money thrown at them to get out of their condo, and so that developers can take it. But
if you bought a condo in an awesome prime location overlooking the water years ago, you're probably going to look really sweet. But if you're trying to acquire one, definitely have to do your due diligence and be careful, because gosh, that could
stuff like this you would normally think is going to create duress, and as investors, particularly, most just everybody, you think duress drives prices down, but then look at Fort Myers Beach.
Yeah.
So yeah, I went to a ULI presentation recently, and the numbers of projects that are going on there and the dollar values are just it's crazy. Yeah,
you have restaurants that traded for 4 or 5 times what they would trade for as a functioning business, then they were basically a pile of 2x4s.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. So
and for those that are watching, don't know what we're talking about. Fort Myers Beach, Hurricane Ian, devastated it. But from an investor side, this sounds somewhat heartless. We're talking about numbers, and they lost everything. But these guys that had their businesses there are selling them for 4 and 5 times what it was worth before the storm. So you think a really horrible thing that took place would devastate the area, and it's done the exact opposite from a real estate value standpoint.
Yeah. Now, in places like the beach, that it has its own kind of limiting factors, the utilities that are coming across. Do they have enough pipe to handle all the sewage that's coming across? But stuff that's mainland that doesn't have that, you're not going to have as much of an issue with that. But I think we're going to see a lot of redevelopment that goes on. Look at Sanibel. Sanibel got smashed, and tons of stuff is just getting redone there. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's basically the end of the presentation. I don't have a whole lot more, but I appreciate you guys having me on, and thank you for letting me present.
No, Dylan, we appreciate you, man. If someone wants to get a hold of you and your firm, what's that? And we can add that to the link as well, but what's your contact information for that?
Please. So just myguardianlegal.com. So we're on the web. We usually have the business cards at the meetings, and my email address is just dylan@myguardianlegal.com. So always happy to help out, and love being a Florida RIA member. It's a great group and association, so I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
I would appreciate that, man. Well, thank you for your time, and we'll post this out there. So thanks again, man.
I'm good. All right, you guys take care.